Hello everyone, I hope you're all doing well. Today we're going to be talking about one of my favorite subjects, art books, specifically some of my favorites. So without further ado, here are my top 10 art books in no particular order. First up is an introduction to art techniques. This is a really amazing reference book that covers basically everything. I've had this book for years and it's still one of the books that I'm constantly grabbing to look through. It covers every type of traditional medium, has information about the supplies themselves, history about the particular medium with examples of notable art created using it, techniques, seriously everything. There's just an insane amount of information packed into this book, and even if I know a bunch of this stuff already, I still like to go back to this book to, I guess, give myself a bit of a refresher course to get myself out of drawing and painting ruts. Unfortunately, it looks like this particular book might be out of print, so if you can't find a copy anywhere, there are a couple of other books that are very similar in content and layout that I also love that I think would make great alternatives to this particular book, especially this next one, Artists' Painting Techniques. I again love this one for very similar reasons to the previous. There's a ton of really useful information packed into one book, and it's great for giving yourself a bit of an information pick-me-up. This particular book is much more painting focused, covering watercolors, oils, and acrylics. It again not only covers information about the supplies themselves and tips on how to use them, but of course there's also lots of painting techniques and exercises that can really help with upping your painting game and inspiring you to try out new methods. Next up is this book. It's titled 1500 Color Mixing Recipes for Oil, Acrylic, and Watercolor, and as the title would suggest, it's a book entirely dedicated to paint color recipes. Again, I think that this is a great reference book, and it's actually possibly the art book that I flip through the most. It's constantly sitting in front of me where I usually work, and I definitely find myself looking at it not only for just a general refresher on how to maybe best go about mixing up a particular color, but also for color inspiration. There's also sections on color breakdowns showcasing examples of what colors would be used for painting certain things like hair, eyes, and more. Overall, this is a really great book that I think a lot of people would find useful. Next is Anatomy for the Artist. Again, a super useful reference book. I feel like this is one of those absolute staple art books that everyone has, and for good reason. This book breaks down everything, literally. It covers skeletal structure of the body, muscle structure. It also has these really cool transparent pages that give you a bit of an X-ray view on how bones sit within the frame of different parts of the body. I'm sure you don't need me to go on about how an anatomy book is an incredibly useful reference tool for an artist. But I know a lot of people already have this book, so another great anatomy book series are the Morpho books. These are a more recent discovery of mine, and I particularly find them interesting and helpful because they're comprised entirely of drawings. Using an actual live example as reference can be great, but I think sometimes seeing how those shapes are broken down and drawn by someone else is its own kind of useful. Next is the Art Museum. Now, I have a lot of art history type books, and it was definitely hard to pick a favorite because there are so many good ones, but this one is just on another level, clearly, because I can barely get this book to fit in frame. This is quite literally a museum in book form. I love being able to grab one book and see some of the most famous and influential art pieces throughout history, although with the size of this book, I think that saying some would be a bit of an understatement. Obviously, this book has an incredible amount of information in it. I particularly find it fascinating not only to read how old some of these pieces are, but also to learn what mediums they were created in. I also like how this particular book also showcases sculptures and other non-two-dimensional art. But there are seriously a ton of amazing art history books, and I think a lot of artists would enjoy being able to look back at some important pieces and draw inspiration from some of them in various ways, whether that's in a particular art style or movement, composition, color palette, whatever. There's a lot to be able to use as inspiration. Next up, The Art of Spirited Away. Now I want to start off by saying that all of the Studio Ghibli art books are absolutely incredible and definitely among my absolute favorites. I'm just specifically mentioning The Art of Spirited Away because it's actually my favorite movie of all time, so obviously its art book was going to be one of my favorites as well. If you've ever seen a Studio Ghibli movie, then you know that they are practically moving paintings. The animation is so gorgeous, and their art books are just as beautiful. The background and landscape paintings, the watercolor concept sketches, dragon haku, just everything about this book I'm obsessed with. If you have a particular favorite Studio Ghibli movie, then I would highly recommend getting an art book of it to flip through when you want to treat your eyes to some beautiful art or when you need that extra kick of inspiration. Next, The Legend of Zelda Breath of the Wild, Creating a Champion. This book is along the same lines as the Spirited Away one, only this time it's from my favorite video game. In fact, I love this book so much that I have 3 different versions of it: the original Japanese version, the deluxe edition, and the normal English version. Again, this book showcases every art and design aspect of the game beautifully so that you can fully appreciate all of the detail and artistry that goes into things. Even if Spirited Away or Breath of the Wild aren't really your thing, I think having art books of some of your favorite media is great to be able to look through when you need some inspiration. And thankfully now there are tons of art books coming out for various movies and video games, so you'll probably be able to find something that really speaks to you artistically. Up next, 1000 Portrait Illustrations. This is very much an inspiration type art book for me. Portraits are my favorite things to draw and paint, and seeing different artists' styles and just how many ways one can go about creating a portrait is very much up my alley. This is also one of those books that I love looking through when I'm feeling in a bit of an artistic rut, looking through this book and taking notes of some of my favorite styles and trying to dissect what it is that I like and dislike about certain pieces. I also really like how in this particular book it gives websites for various artists, so I've been able to track down and follow the artists of some of my favorite pieces on social media to keep up with their work. Another book that I love because of its showcasing of various styles is 100 Illustrators. This book is in 2 volumes, and as the name would suggest, it's a collection of 100 different illustrators' work. I really love just looking through a broad variety of different styles, especially in this situation, because these artists were obviously chosen to be featured in this book, and even though their styles vary greatly, and I personally am not the biggest fan of some of them, they all have equal standing. One style isn't favored above another, which is definitely refreshing because I'm sure a lot of people have felt that the style that comes naturally to them either isn't good enough or wouldn't be seen as something others would care about or want to see. And this book is sort of a direct contradiction to that idea. I also love that this book showcases all different kinds of illustration subjects. I'm obviously partial to portraits, but it's fascinating to see how other artists portray and stylize things like animals, environments, etc. And last but not least, the Star Wars Archives episodes 1 to 3. Come on, you knew I was going to have to throw in a Star Wars art book. Who do you think I am? But seriously, I have a ton of Star Wars art books, and I almost didn't include any simply because I couldn't choose just one favorite. And I didn't want my entire top 10 to just be Star Wars book after Star Wars book. But then this book came along, and I had my winner. Now you might be thinking, the archives for episodes 1 to 3, you picked an art book about the prequels as your favorite? Yes, I did, and here's why. I personally find that at least from a design and art standpoint, the prequels to be much more interesting. The costumes have crazy amounts of detail, there are tons of different types of creatures and planets and droids, plus I obviously love the Clone Wars series, and the prequels are in that same era, so I become much more attached to some of the designs. The Clone Wars art book is great too, although I would have happily had one covering each season instead of just a single consolidated book, but hopefully that's something they change in the future. Not only does this book have gorgeous illustrations and concept work, there are also pictures of some of the props and models, so it really just speaks to all parts of my artistic interests. If you're also a Star Wars fan, I don't think you'd regret picking up any of the art books that they've come out with over the years. And those are my top 10 favorite art books, with some Cliff Note additions. I would love to know what some of your favorite art books are, because one can definitely not have enough art books, and you guys always have great recommendations. So please leave those for me in the comment section. But that is everything, so thank you so much for watching, and I will see you in my next video.